In the courtyard of a 13th century mosque in New Delhi, there is a pillar. It has been standing there for over 1,600 years. It has survived monsoons, humidity, pollution, the rise and fall of empires, and through it all, it has not rusted. Modern iron rusts within years. Exposed to Delhi's intense heat and monsoon humidity, standard iron would be unrecognizable within a century. This pillar has survived 16. If this is the kind of thing you find fascinating, civilizations that were more advanced than history suggests, this channel covers exactly this every week. Subscribe so you catch the next one. In 1912, scientists began studying it. They had no explanation. For nearly a century, it remained a metallurgical miracle. In 2003, researchers at the Indian Institute of Technology finally identified the invisible shield protecting it. A compound called misawite, a thin film that formed on the surface within 3 years of construction and has been growing ever since. But why did it form? The secret lies in the iron itself. Modern steel is stripped of impurities, but ancient smiths left something behind: phosphorus. By keeping phosphorus levels nearly 20 times higher than modern standards, they created a chemical catalyst, a trigger for the misawite to form. The manufacturing was equally vital. They used forge welding, hammering white-hot iron pieces together without ever fully melting the metal. This kept slag, microscopic glass-like impurities, trapped within the iron, acting as physical anchors for the protective film to cling to. And then, there is the climate. Delhi's cycle of monsoon rains, followed by intense dry heat, provides the perfect environment for the film to stabilize. After 1,600 years, that film is less than 1/20th of a millimeter thick. Yet, it has stopped every single rust reaction in its path. When modern metallurgists tried to replicate this ancient protective layer using today's technology, they couldn't. Not because the chemistry is wrong, because the precise method, the rhythm of the hammer, the temperature of the coals, no longer exists. We have lost the skill to build for eternity. This isn't just a story about iron. It's a story about a civilization that understood the earth better than we do. A secret hidden inside the iron that they may have mastered by design, rather than by accident. A legacy of the Gupta Empire. But who were these masters of metal? And why did they build it? The answers lie deep in the history of a forgotten empire. The year is approximately 400 CE. The Gupta Empire controls much of northern India, and it is in the middle of what historians call a golden age. Emperor Chandragupta II, known by his title Vikramaditya, meaning son of power, orders the construction of a monument. Not a temple, not a palace, a pillar. 6 tons of iron, 7 meters tall, dedicated to the god Vishnu. It carries an inscription in ancient Sanskrit that describes the king's military victories across the subcontinent. To build it, Gupta metallurgists used a technique called forge welding. There were no blast furnaces, no industrial smelting. Instead, workers heated lumps of iron ore, each weighing around 45 kilograms, in coal fires, then hammered them together while hot, one piece at a time, until the entire pillar took shape. And here is where the accident happened. When modern blast furnaces smelt iron, they use limestone. The limestone reacts with phosphorus in the ore, and the phosphorus is removed, carried away in the slag. The result is iron with a phosphorus content below 0.5%. But the Gupta smiths didn't use limestone. They used charcoal. And charcoal doesn't remove phosphorus. So every lump of iron they hammered together retained roughly 1% phosphorus, 20 times more than modern iron. This wasn't an advanced discovery. It was a side effect of a simpler process. But its consequences were extraordinary. That elevated phosphorus level is what triggers the misawite reaction. Instead of forming red rust, it forms iron-hydrogen phosphate hydrate, a dense crystalline layer that locks onto the surface and actively prevents further oxidation. The pillar essentially armored itself. Because the phosphorus was distributed unevenly, the protective reaction occurs at every weak point, from every direction. The more vulnerable the spot, the faster the defense forms. It is, by accident, a nearly perfect system, and modern metallurgy, for all its sophistication, has never matched it. The pillar was not always in Delhi. When it was built, it stood at Udayagiri, a sacred site in what is now Madhya Pradesh, roughly 1,200 kilometers from its current location. At some point in the 11th century, it was moved, an extraordinary feat for a 6-ton iron monolith. By whom and how remains genuinely unknown. No records survive. By the 13th century, it stood where it stands today, in the courtyard of the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque, the first mosque built in northern India. The conquering sultan who built the mosque kept the pillar in place. He had no reason to destroy it. It was, even then, clearly something remarkable. In the 18th century, during a military campaign, a cannonball was fired at the pillar. It struck, the iron dented, and the pillar did not break. The cannonball left a mark that is still visible today. A shallow groove in the surface that, like everything else on this structure, has barely changed in 300 years. Scientists have studied the pillar's composition from multiple angles. They have analyzed its microstructure, modeled the growth rate of the protective film, and calculated that the film has been growing at approximately 1/20th of a millimeter every 16 centuries. Their models predict it will continue protecting the iron for the foreseeable future, possibly indefinitely. But there is something the IIT researchers noted that rarely gets discussed. The protective layer didn't form by chance. The forge welding process used by Gupta smiths, hammering iron at high temperature, maintaining consistent heat, cycling the metal through repeated compression, appears to have been specifically optimized, whether intentionally or through generations of trial and error, to preserve exactly this phosphorus profile. In other words, the ancient Indian ironsmiths may not have understood the molecular chemistry, but they understood the process, and they repeated it precisely enough, for long enough, that the result has outlasted everything around it. For all that science has explained about the iron pillar, several things remain unresolved. First, where exactly did it come from? The inscription identifies the king, but not the location of construction. The move from Udayagiri to Delhi would have required moving 6 tons of iron across hundreds of kilometers of terrain. Logistics that, without wheel transport capable of bearing such a load, have never been fully explained. A 6-ton puzzle, dragged across the heart of a subcontinent. Second, why was this technique lost? Other iron objects from the same period, swords, tools, agricultural implements, show similar rust resistance. They are echoes of a lost metallurgical language, but the knowledge of how to consistently produce high phosphorus iron through charcoal forge welding appears to have died with the craftsmen who practiced it. Modern attempts to replicate it in controlled conditions have produced inconsistent results. Our machines can't seem to find the rhythm of the ancient hammer. Third, what else were they capable of? The iron pillar is only the most visible example. The same civilization produced iron temple beams spanning up to 7 meters, forged without modern equipment. Beams that were forged, piece by piece, under the heat of charcoal fires. And like the pillar, they are also still standing. Uncorroded, unbroken. The standard historical narrative positions ancient civilizations as precursors. less developed, less capable. The iron pillar complicates that narrative significantly, not because it suggests lost supernatural knowledge, but because it demonstrates that empirical, practical mastery can produce results that our theoretical understanding hasn't fully caught up with. The ancients didn't need the math to achieve the result. They simply had the process. A process so perfect it has turned 16 centuries into a single moment. The IIT researchers who cracked the misawite mystery noted that their kinetic model may be applicable to modern nuclear waste containment, designing containers that need to remain sealed for thousands of years. An ancient Indian smith's technique, discovered through coal fires and iron hammers in 400 CE, may inform how we store the most dangerous materials on Earth in the 21st century. The pillar does not rust. It has not rusted for 16 centuries. And the civilization that built it left behind something that continues to teach us, quietly, standing in a courtyard in New Delhi, a testament to a golden age that hasn't quite ended, a silent guardian of a secret we are only just beginning to understand. Thank you for watching. Still standing, still waiting.